Welcome back to Strategy Immersion Training. And if this is your first time watching one of our little mini live trainings, welcome. We're actually working in what I call an immersion training where you get deep dive kind of nuts and bolts and finer points on what we call strategy coaching, which is the method of working with a client on how they produce internal and external results in their life, in their business. And today we're going to get into why people don't change. So I thought this was apropos, I guess you might say, because last week in week 3, we talked about how people actually do change and like how people, what that actually make a change, like how that actually happens. But I think today is actually even more important. And I say that because if you don't know why somebody kind of stays stuck, I mean, people change, there's no doubt. But when someone's coming to you as a leader, as a coach, as a manager, as someone who's going to facilitate a change for them, they're not coming to you because they just need some how-to advice, right? They're not coming to you because like they are going to have an easy time making this change. They're coming to you because they probably do feel like they're stuck, like they really aren't changing, or they can't change, or they won't change if they don't get like outside intervention. So this is really where we start getting into intervening on your client's behalf for your client's benefit, at your client's request as well. So that's really what we're going to cover today. So before we start, just to clarify, when we work together in these live streams, I really encourage you to make comments and ask questions and clarify things. I'm happy to check those. One of the reasons I do these live is not just to like put me under pressure to deliver some great content and some training, but also to make sure that if there is anything that I'm explaining that doesn't make sense, or that you have something you'd like to hear added to it, that that I could see that in real time, and we can actually kind of modify and co-create this work that we're doing together. So those that watch this at a later point, if you're seeing it on a replay, or if you're in a later training, you're going to benefit from past students and their thoughts and their challenges and their confusion. Because I can tell you right off the bat, when I started doing strategy training, when I started becoming a strategy coach, I didn't just fall out of bed and coach perfectly the first time. I really had very, very little clue as to how I was really going to produce results for people. And it showed, I stumbled for years, quite a bit. It didn't mean I didn't help people at all, but I had plenty of challenges. All right, so let's get into this. Why people don't change. That's what we're covering today, as it says here. So there's a couple, I'm not sure if I wrote this down or not. Did I? Let me make sure. Yeah, I did. So I'm just going to go ahead and rip this beautiful cover off right now. Get out of here. Let's go ahead and get into, I wasn't planning on writing this down, but I figured why not. So how do you change someone that doesn't want to change? How do you do it? Now, your first answer might be you don't. You don't change those people, because they don't want to change. So how could you help somebody who doesn't want your help, who doesn't want to actually make the change? Well, I'm telling you, like I just said a minute ago, maybe in different terms, that's why your client is coming to you. Because at some level, they don't want to change, or else they would have just changed already. They're coming to you so that you actually can change them, so to speak, or you can facilitate or help them to make a change that they actually don't want to make. If it's not for this, like what is your job there for? Just give them a how-to information? Like books help with that nowadays. Google helps with that nowadays. I mean, you want to know how to change because you already want to. You can learn that without anybody's help nowadays because all the information is available for free. I mean, it's been available for a while, but the reason why somebody actually comes to you is because they're looking for more than just some information. And so I remember early on in my coaching career, I went to a training And these guys were supposedly like some of the top coaches in the world. I mean, if I mention the name of the training organization, not Tony Robbins. I work for Tony, but I was going to a different training. And anyway, if I mention them, you would know who they are. They operate in like 50 different countries, very well known, got great technology also. I learned a lot from them. But one of the things they said to me early on in the first couple of years that I worked with them and I learned from them was, we just coach to give people a choice. We just want to give you a real legitimate choice, and then you have to choose, right? Well, the problem with that is that what about, once again, all these people who don't want to change? Like, if you just say, well, I'm just going to give you a choice to change, and you already know they don't want to change, well, you're not really doing them any good. You're not helping them. You're not making a difference for them. They're not going to get a breakthrough out of a choice alone. They're just going to say, well, I just choose not to change. Thanks a lot, coach, right? And, these guys were charging thousands of dollars for that level of intentionality. And again, it's okay. I mean, that was their philosophy. That's where they kind of came across in their coaching in a very kind of unattached fashion. But I think this really leaves something to be desired, don't you? I mean, shouldn't you at least desire to have more power as a coach than just saying, well, I'm just going to give you a choice. You figure it out. You work it out. Like, you just decide, like, because you were totally fine before you came here. Like, you didn't need me, right? So I'm just going to give you a choice. Come on, and then just make whatever choice you want to make. It's fine. It's fine either way. No big deal. It's just your life, right? That kind of attitude, like, I have a problem with that. And so how do you actually make a change for somebody that doesn't want to change, though? Well, I'll tell you, I attempted to do this for many years. And I would show my client how to make the change. We've been talking about that last 3 weeks or so. Check those past videos and or those live streams. And of course, your training, if you're in strategy immersion training, I would show them, here's how you do it. Here's the mechanics of it. Here's the buttons you push. Here's the method, how to get from A to B. I would show them all the external strategies, all the internal strategies, everything that they needed to just be fully aligned and power forward to the next level in their life or their career or their relationship or their finances, or you get the idea, their time management, etc. Just whatever, right? And then I would fail. And they would say things like, you know what, I just don't want to do that, Jeff. Like, I want to get the result I want, but I'm not going to do that you showed me how to do that actually works. I just don't want to do that. I remember distinctly to this day, a client, still a good friend of mine, but I would regularly give him strategies that I know provide breakthroughs for clients all the time. And I would explain it to him, and I would give him homework to go do it, and he would promise to do it, and then would come back after a couple weeks, couple months, whatever, and I would say, hey, how did that strategy go? How'd that work for you? Like, did you do it? Did you try it? Did you follow through on it? He said, no, I didn't do it. Didn't use it. And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't use it? I mean, that was the thing that was going to make the difference. I mean, this is the whole point of us working together. This is the goal that you have, and that's going to get you your goal. And he said, that just doesn't work for me. That thing that you gave me, that doesn't work for me, Jeff. And it was just a real kind of flippant, like, nah, that doesn't work for me. I tried that, doesn't work. Doesn't work for me, right? He hadn't tried it when I was working with him. He hadn't tried exactly what I gave him, although he just kind of like generalized that kind of thing doesn't work for me, right? So this happened all the time. And finally, I started to realize, and as I kind of alluded to a second ago when I talked about this whole like, well, we're just going to give you a choice and good luck. Hope you choose the right choice, even though you've always chosen the wrong choice in the past or for the last decade or in this situation. But all of these little conversations, I'm just going to give you a choice, you work it out, or I just don't want to do that, or that just doesn't work for me. These are all cop-outs. And I'm not just saying they're cop-outs for your client. I mean, these are things my clients said to me. And so, yeah, I guess you could kind of complain that those were cop outs that my client gave me, kind of a cop out. But these are cop outs for you. Like, you can't accept work that this is all you end up with and it doesn't get anywhere. Like, that's not okay. It's not enough value for the fee that you probably need to make this worthwhile. And frankly, it's not the value that you are probably committed to giving your client either. It's just not enough. And if this is what you put up with from yourself, from your clients, or this is what you create and you never get past this stuff, there's no question where that coaching is going. There's no question where your practice is going. I mean, you might market yourself as somebody who can help people. You might do a good job onboarding clients and making some money, but you're not going to make a difference for people that in any way that's going to be even close to what people have to put out, even if it's just time, in order to actually get work with you. It's not, and you're going to know it. And my guess is, maybe you do that because you need to feed your family or you think it's a cool thing, but I doubt you'll be able to sleep at night doing that, at least at this point, and you're not going to do it comfortably. So let's not accept these cop-outs. This is not okay. And so at the same time, we're still left with this question: how do you change somebody that doesn't want to change? These are the kind of things that you're facing. Now, what are you going to do? So let's kick this out, if I can get it out of my way. And first, we want to know, why don't they want to change? I mean, if they really don't want to change and we're supposed to change them, we need to know what's having them not want it. Like, what is going on there? Because if you're working with somebody that truly wants to change, then this isn't an issue for you. Now, you still may face some of those cop-outs, but they're probably at the most going to be temporary. They're not going to stick to their guns, chances are. They might have some momentary resistance or some token issues or a little bit of, short-term fear, let's say. But anybody can get people past that, a little bit of a pep talk, right? It's not going to take anything really sophisticated as a coach. So now we want to drill down and ask, why don't they want to change? Like, what's actually going on there? And the answer is actually fairly simple, and I wrote it down here. They do want to change. They just don't want to do what's necessary to change. So they want the change. That's what they came for. That's what they came to your coaching for. So they do actually want to see the change that they asked you for. They just don't want to do what's necessary in order to cause that change for themselves. Now, by the way, this is a huge problem when it comes to the difference between the marketing of your coaching or your trainings or your seminars or your offerings and the actual delivery of the results that are promised there. Because you can offer change that people want, transformation that people are after. In fact, there's a lot of organizations that will teach you to convince someone that they need to transform and to kind of sell the transformation and kind of egg them on about how completely transforming who they are, their life or their feelings or their business or their finances is really an amazing thing, and it's worth investing in, and then convincing them that you can actually cause that for them. But very seldom do those people that are suggesting that you do that actually follow through with, okay, and then here's how you're actually going to deliver that transformation. There's a few that do. There are exceptions that prove the rule. But most of that's really just marketing hype. Most of that, unfortunately, is just a lot of talk and a way to collect somebody's money as kind of a money grab, and it doesn't actually turn into real value for the client. So they want to change, they just don't want to do what's necessary. And by the way, if I don't want to do what's necessary, even though I want to change, and you tell me you're going to cause the change and all I got to do is pay you, I'm probably going to pay you, right? Because, hey, if I could pay you instead of actually doing what's necessary, why don't I just do that? And you will actually see clients come to you or show up in other trainings or other offerings. And they're there because they just don't want to do what's necessary, but they figured, wow, I could just throw money at that problem. I could just throw money at my laziness. I could throw money at my fear. I could throw money at my at my lack of balance in my life. I could throw money at my apathy, and it'll all just work out because, you're going to take care of that for me. Like, I just give up and let you handle it. And people want that a lot of times. People want somebody else to clean up the mess. They want a magic process. They're looking for that. But I'm not talking about the marketing here. I'm actually talking about the real delivery of change, even when somebody wants to change, but they don't want to do what's necessary. And so, just to clarify, I think I got all this written down. I could just get rid of this. The reason why they're not willing to do what's necessary, as I say here, is it's very, very simple. The why not, and I'm oversimplifying here to be fair, is that pleasure and pain is imbalanced against doing what's necessary. Now, to some extent, it even could be imbalanced against them making a change. But again, they came to you for this change. So chances are they actually feel a lot of pleasure and pain pushing them to change, which is why they're there. But the reason why they don't do what's necessary is because they have a lot of pain and pleasure pushing them away from this, away from doing what's necessary. So pleasure goes up and down, pain goes up and down, but ultimately they never get to a tipping point where doing what's necessary actually becomes so motivating that they just go ahead and do it. You ever have an experience like that, like in your life, where you knew you wanted something, but you also knew the thing that it was going to take to get it was something that you weren't willing to do or you didn't seem to be doing, and maybe you made up you weren't able to do it, but you kind of knew better? You knew, what, I could really do that, but you know what, that'd be really painful. And you know what, I'd have to give up on all this other pleasure in order to do what's necessary. And so you didn't. Maybe for years. Maybe you still aren't. Now, there are points where people will break through that. Maybe you've had experience like that. We're going to talk about why that happened for you, if that's the case, or why it happened for a client, even if you you weren't conscious of what actually happened in your work with that client or what they actually did ultimately to cause that. So the reason why they don't want to do what's necessary, other than this oversimplification of pleasure and pain forces, is because something else is controlling their motivation. Something else is going on because they know they want the change. They probably logically even know that if they could just get themselves to do what's necessary, they would get the change and they'd probably have more pleasure and less pain, or both. Something else, however, is controlling their not doing what's necessary. It's not just basic surface level pleasure and pain. So let's actually get into what that is. Hope I could do this all in one. Yes, that worked. All right. So before we get to that, I want to clarify actually a fairly simple concept, but this is the first time I've ever really gotten into this, and I want to make sure that there's no way you can misunderstand this. So let's talk about the difference between wants and needs. So I might be hungry and I want ice cream. That's a want. Nobody needs ice cream. You might think you need ice cream, right? But you really don't need ice cream. Your kids might try to convince you that they have to have ice cream, but they really don't need it, right? That's not a need. That's a want. However, you do need like food and water, right? Like we have to have those things. We don't have a choice. Those are necessities. So that's a need. Ice cream's a want. You might want a mansion, but you really don't need a mansion. Now, again, people that live in mansions, a lot of times they think they need their mansion, and all of a sudden becomes like a survival thing for them. But you do need like a roof over your head. You need to stay warm and dry. You don't want to die of exposure, right? So there are certain things you need that a mansion might provide, but you don't need the mansion. Just anything, like people in the third world, they have corrugated metal over their heads and, some makeshift boards as walls. And okay, it kept them warm enough and dry enough to survive. They got what they needed. They might not have gotten the mansion. I talked to my wife today actually, and she does refurbishments on like some very high-end homes, and she said, I really want one of those mansions. It's really nice to have that, house on the water. We really need to get one of those, right? But that wasn't really a need. She doesn't have to have that. She might feel like she needs it, right? But again, that's just like, wow, wouldn't it be nice? That's a want. There's nothing in your life that's a need, that's a wouldn't it be nice kind of experience. Those are all wants. Okay, one more, kind of in a different area of life. You might want the perfect mate. I want the perfect man or woman. I want the perfect wife or husband. He or she needs to have this, 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 and this. You need to get your laundry list of all the things that you're looking for that would make it just a dream and feel so good. But we've proven over and over again in the history of humanity that that is not a need. Right? I remember watching Oprah one time, and Oprah was saying, what I learned over the last 20 years of my life, I've gotten some wisdom over that period of time, and I realized, I don't need that, that significant other, that perfect man, that man that's going to save me and take care of me and all that kind of stuff. I don't need that. It's not a need. It feels like a need sometimes. I thought it was a need. Society sometimes teaches us those are needs, but it's not. There's plenty of people that survive just fine without the perfect mate. However, we do need to some extent. Now, this is maybe more psychological need. We're not going to die without it. There's a lot of hermits that prove that this is not a physical need, but we need friends and family, or one or the other at least, right? We need some amount of connection with those individuals, or with somebody that we can connect with, right? So to some extent, I think you could argue that that's kind of a need, right? But you don't need a perfect mate. That's a want. So hope this makes sense. Super simple, I'm hoping. But wants are things that are optional. Needs are necessary. That's the difference. Super simple. If it's a need, it must be necessary. If it's not necessary, you ask yourself, do I really need that? If it's not necessary, it's not a need, it's a want. You just want that. You might justify that you think you need it, but you don't. You really just want it. So as the coach, as the leader who is attempting to take this individual that doesn't want to do what's necessary, supposedly maybe doesn't even really want to change, and you're supposed to cause change in that individual, your job and the secret here, so to speak, is to change, or change that you cause is taking something optional and making it necessary. Taking something optional and making it necessary. So if I'm coaching someone on finding the perfect mate, the reason that they don't have that perfect mate is either because they have a blueprint that is totally out of the reality zone of what their perfect mate would really be, which happens a lot. Or it could simply be they really do look at that as a want, and it's really not necessary for them. They haven't made it necessary. So I can work with them on actually causing the change to actually occur by making that necessary, having it so they'll do whatever it takes to create that. Or the mansion. I bet you most of those individuals that get the mansion, at some point they made that a necessity for them. Now, it's really not a necessity, but they acted as if it was. To them, it became a need. To them, so to speak. So this is, again, an oversimplification, but I hope this makes sense, that it's not just pleasure and pain. There's plenty of pleasurable things. Ice cream, mansion, perfect mate. We don't get those things. So even though those things would be more pleasurable than maybe what you got right now, it doesn't mean they happen, because people don't get their wants all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Most of the time, you might even argue that they don't. But we always get our needs. Always get our needs met. So this is the trick. Taking something that somebody psychologically thinks as optional, or thinks of as optional, and then making it a necessity in their mind. So, how do you do that? First, we have to understand what are psychological necessities. Because of course, you got to have water and food and and make sure you don't die physically. Usually that's not what you're working on with your clients. So we're talking about psychological wants and desires versus psychological needs and necessities, okay? And so when we talk about these survival needs, I'm not talking about basic physical needs. Now, basic physical needs, people will look at those with a psychological lens, and so some of these actually will be covered. However, we're really talking about psychological survival, not physical survival. Hope that makes sense. So, there are survival needs, psychological survival needs that every client that you will ever work with has. You and I have these needs. Your client has these needs. Every human being on the face of the earth that at least I've seen and worked with and seen other people work with has these needs. There are 4 of them. And when you know what these are, you can take things that seem like they're optional because they're not necessarily as connected to any or all of these needs in their mind and connect them up so they become psychological necessities. Because anything that is really not necessary, but you think it's necessary, you live like it's necessary, you act like it's necessary, and so you created it and caused it to be necessary. The only reason that happened is because one or more of these needs, you somehow hooked up that having that thing that you call a necessity, even though it's not, actually will grant you and meet some of these survival needs. And therefore it became survival for you. And you could do this for your client as well, or you can work with and facilitate your client making these connections. Make sense? All right, let's get into the details on this. So there's 4 of these, like I said, and each one of them has an absolute necessity to be met in your client. So I'll start over here with certainty. Certainty is the need for predictability, control, some people will call this. Some people will call this comfort. Like if I could just be comfortable, like that's good enough because I'm at least avoiding pain a lot of times. So people that seem like, they don't have the highest standards, a lot of times they're just going for certainty, i.e. comfort. So comfort/certainty would be a great way of saying this. Somebody says, I'm a control freak. You're not a control freak. You're a certainty freak. You just think having control is the way for you to get that need met. Make sense? So whether you call it certainty or control or comfort or predictability, people that, and all of us, need a sense that the sun's going to rise in the morning, that we're not going to die anytime soon, that we can predict what's going to happen. In fact, even if somebody's on their deathbed and they know it, they know they're not long for this world, what do people say? What do the doctors say? What does hospice say? They say, well, we can make them comfortable. Key word, comfort. Even though they're not long for this world physically, we still understand, whether we're conscious of it or not, that this need is still a need that we can grant, or we at least attempt to grant people until they're gone. At least we can have them be comfortable, even though they're not going to be alive for long. They could be comfortable on their way. So they're talking about that palliative process. They're talking about providing comfort/certainty for the family, for the individual who's passing. Make sense? If you look at any area of life, there's always a need for certainty in that area to some extent, or by some people. Like finance is a great example. People actually invest in what we call securities. And it's a great marketing term because guess what? Security is like certainty, right? Security, comfort, control. This is secure. It's safe. All those different words are just other ways of saying certainty, predictability, and comfort, right? So people will say, hey, I'm broke, I'm going bankrupt, I need money, I'm in survival. To them, that money equals certainty, whether they can predict the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. And so they're on a train to try to fix that, and they're in massive pain, not because of the money. There's plenty of people that are fine with way less money than that individual, but because to them that means certainty. And so you find people that are in survival mode or they're having trouble creating certainty, whether it's because of a health issue or because of a financial issue or because of a relationship issue. And the reason those issues are causing them such pain is not because of the issue. It's because they've attached that area of their life, finances, relationships, health, etc., to having a sense of certainty, comfort, predictability, that kind of stuff. Security, safety. And so if you suddenly got certainty, comfort from your wife or husband or from your family, and then your wife or husband leaves you one day, all of a sudden this leaves too. In your mind, at least. Didn't really leave. But because you had attached this to them, it did leave. And people will kill themselves because they feel like psychologically they're not surviving, and that's the only way they can actually survive. And of course, you're not in control of everybody else on the planet. So when they go and certainty goes, it's like, why should I stick around? I'm not even meeting my needs anymore, my basic survival needs, because these are true necessities. If you get certainty from money and all of a sudden you lose all the money, all certainty goes, you're going to go insane or kill yourself or check out, or you'll find another way to get certainty. Those are the options. There's not a lot. Really, there's only two options. Either leave, like die, so you no longer are in that kind of pain for having zero certainty, or do anything else to get the certainty, and that includes going insane. People will go absolutely insane, do the most destructive thing that you could possibly imagine in order to meet that need, or any of these needs for that matter. Now, people meet certainty to some extent, and then eventually, if they can meet this consistently enough, people tend to get bored, right? In fact, when you meet somebody that's constantly complaining how bored they are, usually they're a real certainty nut, and they've created a boring life, not because they like being bored, but because they wanted certainty so much, and now they're paying the price for it because they're super certain, but they're super bored at the same time. And the reason why people get bored, whether it's just because they got a lot of certainty or they're just feeling that boredom, is because we also have a need for variety, which is kind of like the opposite. That's what we call these paired opposites, right? And so we all need variety. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, you ever notice how excruciating it gets? Now, for most people, some people are, able to overcome that more easily, but it's like a biochemical thing. Like you do something for more than a couple hours, adrenaline goes through your entire system. I mean, we can measure this biochemically, right? Variety is a need. And if we don't take a break or don't go do something else or shake it up a little bit, just a little bit, like turn on the TV or surf the internet or take a break or go meditate, anything other than what we've been doing that's been so repetitive, adrenaline shoots through our system, your entire bloodstream turns to acid, and you get the jitters, and people have to interrupt themselves after a certain point. So we all have a need for variety. Now you can call this novelty or growth or excitement or mystery. There's all sorts of different words in the lexicon of variety, but we all have a need for this as well. And most people get it through, like drugs or through people, friends, or through, entertainment is one of the key ways that a lot of people get variety, because they got so much certainty from their real life and their life became boring, so they entertain themselves out of that boredom, right? This is not atypical. This is something you're going to see in some of your clients, if not in yourself, right? So some people live in this frame of like going between certainty and variety. They get lots of certainty, they get bored, they go after some variety, they start losing certainty because they were overindulging in variety, they go back into certainty over and over and over and over again. And they never kind of elevate beyond that frame. However, somebody meets enough certainty and they're fulfilling that, and they've gotten enough variety to at least feel like, there's some newness in their life, a variety, the spice of life, so to speak. Usually they want more than just a little bit of entertainment and safety in their life, and they go after this third need, significance, because they want a life of meaning, a life that has purpose. They want to self-actualize. They want to become somebody significant, otherwise known as proud or special or different. Right? Lots of different ways that people will talk about significance, having a sense of power, setting yourself apart. And by the way, there's lots of different ways to meet significance. We can get significance by being better at something, by really contributing in a significant way, in a way that's special, that we could be proud of. Or we can also get significance by being destructive, by having a big problem, because everybody pays attention to that, at least as significant, even if it's negative significance. People take that too. There's a lot of ways that you can meet these needs that are very painful. But people will do that just to meet these needs, because being out of pain, having consistent pleasure and joy and fulfillment in your life, those aren't necessities, those are wants. These are needs. So you got to meet these. So people will sacrifice their values. They'll sacrifice their fulfillment level in their life just so they could get these met. And these don't always even feel good. They're just like, okay, it's like you ate a meal because you're starving, right? It's like, it might taste extra good for a short time, but you're really just doing it because you have to. Does that make sense? This is like, think of this like being on a chain. Like you're a slave to these. These are like the puppet strings. I should have been the metaphor for this whole conversation. It's like, think of this like these are, like you've got this, Pinocchio marionette, and these needs are the strings that control that puppet. That puppet is not consciously, willfully saying, I'm going to go this way, I'm going to do that, I'm going to move around. These are moving the puppet. You are totally a puppet of these needs. Almost totally a puppet of these needs, let's say. Very few exceptions to that, right? And so you're just a puppet at the end of a puppeteer's string, chasing these down or finding ways to meet these, and then getting kind of stuck in those ways, because all of a sudden you start making those ways into these things as if they are, which they're not. Saying that money is certainty is like saying, the picture of the food you see on the Denny's menu is the food. It ain't, right? It represents that. It might create an emotion for you of that, but that's all just something you hooked up in your head, right? And it makes us into these puppets who are, again, they're not necessarily going after what they really want in their life. They're just trying to continue to follow what the puppeteer says, which is these bosses, basically. Now, by the way, I don't want to say this in like a real negative way. I hope you're not taking it that way. I want to share this because it's important to understand if these are our puppet strings, we better know what those puppet strings are, because then at least we have a chance to make some transformation happen there, like we talked about with our client. The reason that client doesn't change is they're a puppet to these needs, and they don't even know that they're a puppet to them. They don't even know what they are. They don't even see the strings. If you could see the strings, help them see the strings, suddenly maybe those strings aren't going to be the only motivating factor in them not doing this or doing that or not doing what's necessary. Make sense? This is really important to get. These are necessities. They're all necessary, at least in our mind. So significance, sense of pride, power, being special, being different in a good or bad way. And then finally, by the way, when people meet significance at a really high level, they say it's lonely at the top. The truth is the top isn't lonely, it's just less crowded. However, most people that are significantly driven by this, or driven by significance, so to speak, they make this so important that they miss out on the opposite, the paired opposite, love and connection. Because if you're totally significant, you got to kind of separate yourself from others. You got to stand apart, right? And so people that are really driven in this area, operationally speaking at least, a lot of times they will separate themselves even more from others, not because they have to, but because it's part of the way they operate. It's part of their puppet strings that are running them. So they miss out on all the love and connection they could have with other people because they're too busy separating themselves from them, too busy being different, too busy, being other than that. Because love and connection is a sense of oneness with others. It's sameness, not difference, right? It's blending in. In fact, people will get into amazing relationships that they're totally in love with and totally connected. And eventually, what's the complaint that they share? Usually it's something like, I feel like I'm losing myself. I've lost myself in this relationship. Well, that's what this is. When's the last time you felt total love and connection and you didn't lose yourself? That's the point. whether it's being in love with what you're doing at that moment. You lose track of time. You can't even remember, like that you have your own other needs, right? Or you're with somebody or with a group or with friends or with family or with a lover, and you don't even care about like eating the next time. It's just like, I just want to stay in this feeling, right? And you forget about yourself. You're just like, time disappears, you disappear, nothing else matters. It's just this. It's just this is all that matters, right? It's kind of like tunnel vision. So you lose yourself and all of a sudden you're one with someone else. You're totally connected, but you're losing some of that sense of self, i.e. significance. So these, again, are paired opposites, right? You get more of this, a lot of times it's going to feel like you're getting less of the other. It doesn't mean you have to, but it's going to seem that way because these kind of modes, these states of mind are so opposed in a way. The feeling of certainty, can you imagine that? Like everything's going to be the same. I'm total control. I know my whole life is laid out for me and my destiny is predictable. Like how much variety does that give you? Doesn't feel like it would be real exciting, right? It just feels like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. I'm kind of bored, right? If you got total variety, like who knows what's going to happen? Like maybe we'll live, maybe we'll die. Maybe we win, maybe we lose. Like that doesn't feel very certain, right? And yet that's a need that we want to meet as well. Same thing. I'm totally different than everyone. Well, feel maybe a bit disconnected with that mindset. And again, I'm at one with the world. I'm at one with the universe. Sounds nice, but it's not going to work long term for anyone to just be in that mode because everybody needs this too. And if you're just one with the universe, then you're just part of the universe. And like, what makes you different than the rest of the universe? How do you stand out? You're going to miss out on that feeling to some extent. Or it's likely that occurs with this mindset being predominant operationally speaking at that time. Does this make sense? These are paired opposites, as I talked about it here. You get more of one. Usually you'll feel like you're getting less of the other. Doesn't mean that you don't have a life with variety or significance or whatever. It just means that because you're in that mode and you're kind of overvaluing one of these, you're moving away from the other. You move towards one, you move away from the other. Got it? So these are all necessary. They're like puppet strings. You're kind of a slave to them, as your client is, as we all are. And they're also paired opposites. In other words, as you get more of one, you're usually weakening the other area, either operationally speaking or in terms of what you're feeling inside. I'll give you one more example of this. There was a coworker I worked with, probably 10 years ago now. And he said, I go out on the road, and he gave these presentations he would sell to groups, right? He was very good at it. And he would say, I go out on the road, and I'm a road warrior, and I just kick ass and take names, and I make all these sales. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars for myself and my organization, and I feel like really significant. I feel like I'm crushing it every day, like I kick ass and take names. But, after a while, I miss my wife. I feel like do I even know her anymore? I feel like there's something missing, like there's a hole inside my heart. I feel lonely. I feel like I'm just by myself and there's like I'm disconnected. He was moving in significance area and missing out on love and connection. And then he would say the same thing in the opposite direction. He would say, and then I come home and I'm with my wife and my family for a while and I'm taking care of them and I'm like the good father and, I eat dinner with everybody. I'm just like a part of the whole family, and I forget all about that whole road warrior thing and kicking ass and taking names. And I'm just dad, that's all I am, and it really feels good for a while. But, after a while, I'm like, I'm tired of just doing this. I was like, I want to go make something happen. I want to achieve something. I want something significant, something I can be proud of. Now, somebody might argue, well, hey, you should be proud of your family. You raise that family. You take care of that family. Well, not everybody is going to feel that that's significant to them. Not everybody's going to feel that consistency of doing that over and over again is significant enough for them to meet this need. Because his idea of himself was not just that he's a nice guy and he was connected with his family, but he provided for his family, and that's one of the things it took for him to make significance work for him, so to actually turn significance on. That was one of his puppet strings. So he'd go back and forth between significance and love. Significance going out on the road, love being with the family, and back and forth and back and forth. But neither the twain would meet, right? He's not getting both at the same time. He just has a life where he has access to one or the other, but he doesn't really get a lot of synergy between the two, right? So whether somebody's like gets bored and they go for adventure and then they get scared and go back to a boring life. I remember I knew somebody, I just forget to think about it, who he was very certainty driven. You know, he was an IT consultant and he would go from job to job doing IT work, and he made hundreds of dollars per hour doing this work. He was an amazing programmer, very smart man, and was one of the partners with one of the big 5 consultancies, you know, like Deloitte or whatever, or PwC. And then he would make all this money, i.e. certainty, and he would save it up, and he would say, okay, you know what? I'm tired of this boring ass, like being a consultant lifestyle. I've had it. I've had enough of that. You know, it's like, I just can't stand doing the same thing every day. And, you know, I want a life that's going to be more of an adventure where I make a whole different level of contribution to the world. And I really find some new things that I can do and make a business out of it. Because entrepreneurial adventure would be something I'd be totally passionate about. And then he'd quit his certainty, i.e. his job, take all his certainty and spend it on creating variety and take courses and get entrepreneurial and start businesses and do all this crazy stuff. And guess what? When that stuff didn't work just right, and it wasn't as certain as his IT profession, suddenly he would freak out and get scared, and some of the money, you know, some of the IE certainty started to go away, started to dwindle down because he spent a lot of it, and he's getting lower and lower in terms of his burn rate is getting to the point where the money is dwindling down to very little left, very little certainty left, if you will. He's getting a lot of variety, a lot of adventure. But now he's scared because there's not enough certainty for him. And then I tell you, like clockwork, every couple years, he would go back and forth between those two worlds, between those two modes. He would be out here in entrepreneurial land for a year or so, and then he'd finally just say, you know what, that's it. I just want to make some money, i.e. I want to get my certainty back. And he would cut his business off at the knees. Right when he could have like shifted and turned things to the next level and actually gotten more certainty from his new profession, but he would hobble that, and the puppet strings would pull him right back to certainty. And so we knew what was hooking him the whole time. And he'd go get certainty and go make money again, and he'd go back and forth and back and forth. Talking about uncertain, talking about unstable. Really, really struggled with that for years. And I was in his mastermind, and we watched him do this for like a decade, trying to figure out how do we help him get past it. I mean, I even knew this stuff at the time. I was trying to explain it to him. And yet, even that awareness level, he was still kind of controlled by those puppet strings. Have you ever known anybody who went back and forth between two of these paired opposites needs because they'd meet one and not get the other? And they'd go back and forth between the two, and it wasn't a very elegant life for them. They'd have to go get fed with significance, and then go get fed with love and connection, or go get fed with certainty, and then go get fed with variety. It's not the best level of balance, if you will, in a human being. And it also teaches us over time that there's never enough of any of it. And, you know, we're always robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know, we're always feeling like we're in like scarcity, if you will. So these are paired opposites. I think I've made that point. They're all necessary. Even when you're getting a lot of variety, you're going to feel like you need more certainty. You're going to start pursuing that as well. And we got to meet all of them. And frankly, we got to meet all of them simultaneously, at least at a low level, right? So even though somebody might be getting a lot more significance, they still got to get a little bit of connection at some level, or else they wouldn't survive. So, this makes sense. If you've got any questions about this, let me know. These are your puppet strings. These are your client's puppet strings. This is what controls them. This is why the whole point of this conversation, this is why people don't change. They don't change because they're the puppet at the end of these strings, and even though they want to not be that puppet, they still are that puppet. So even though they want to go out after their new business or go after that better relationship or go after that improvement in health and lifestyle, guess what? Doing that would probably threaten the way, at least, they currently meet these needs. The reason people want to change is some of these needs maybe aren't met at very high levels, right? That like maybe, I'm a housewife, I got a lot of love and connection, but I don't really feel like I'm very special, right? Because I'm just a housewife, right? Creating life, right? Not very significant, but you get the idea. So they feel like some of these needs are not being met and they want to pursue those. Those are your goals, the needs that are wounds for you that are not really being met right now. But the reason why people don't change is some of these needs are being met by their current life and they don't want to give that up. So it's like, well, gosh, I could go be significant and I go be a road warrior like my husband and be all important and proud and powerful and just, own everyone around me and influence them like crazy and be an amazing leader, be the Pied Piper of X, Y, and Z. But, what about my family? I'm responsible for them. But it's not just responsibility, it's love and connection that they get from being responsible and probably some certainty as well. So the reason that individual is not going to change is because they meet needs already by their current life. If there's something you're indulging in right now, something that you're addicted to, something like you can't stop, it's because one of these needs are met at a high level probably. If not, probably 2 or 3 of them are met at a high level without much effort being given to meet all those needs, right? The reason why you want to make that change, why you want to quit that addiction or you want to change that habit or you want to start the new thing that's so hard to start is because there's a need or two that's not being met by your current life and you think that's going to meet that need. That's it. That's why you want it. And that's frankly why you probably feel like you need it because there's something that's painful because you're not getting variety or certainty or significance at a high enough level to really like ring your bells. You get it? So the question now is not whether or not you need to meet all these. The question is not whether or not your client has got to meet all those needs. The question is how. I know you and your clients, anybody you'll ever meet on the planet, have to get love and connection. You got to get significance. You got to have some certainty, and you need some variety as well. At least at like 1s, 2s, and 3s, if not at 9s and 10s out of 10. You got to meet those needs. Question is not whether you get to decide whether you meet these needs. You don't have a choice about that. There is no choice. You're the puppet, right? The question is, how are you going to meet these? That is what makes people different. That's the difference in people. You look at the difference between, a leader who lies and walks all over people and is a bully, and a leader who's gentle and charismatic and giving, and always tells the truth. The difference isn't. They all need to meet these 4 needs. They just have different ways of doing it. Like I learned, gosh, if I lie about this and I fight for this and I beat people up, then I'm going to get significance. And, some people will love me and I'll have control and certain, you can meet all your needs by being a total jerk. Or you could say, you know what, if I always tell the truth, I'll be like my dad because he always taught me to tell the truth. And so I'm like significant, I'm connected with him, and I've got certainty because at least I know the truth and I'm sharing it. And I have a certain amount of control over that because people know that they can count on me and they know that they can team up with me. Like anything that anybody does in life, they can meet their needs by doing it, destructive or constructive. This is it. And you want to help your client move from destructive ways of meeting their needs to constructive, or less constructive to more constructive, or just from A to B. Like same constructivity, but they have their own, recipe for chicken soup that they want to create for their life, right? Their own kind of idea in their head about what their vision is. Great. Find ways where they can meet their needs by making that change at even higher levels. And why, if they stay where they are, regardless of how great it is, why they're not going to meet these needs at as high a level as they really choose to, as they really want to. And they'll make those changes. They'll start to make those alterations. This is what makes people different. How they meet significance, how they meet variety, how they meet love and connection, and how they meet certainty, because everybody's got a different how. So let's talk about the how then. I'll give you an example. Years ago, when I first got married, I was spending time with my family, and I would find that I would get really angry, like really hyper angry, upset, and I would start to do destructive things, bordering, I mean, I didn't want to be abusive, but like bordering on abusive things to people I loved, with people I loved, my family. And I was trying to figure out, like, why am I doing this? Why am I like going off the handle about something that I know better? Have you ever done that where you like had an emotional reaction to something and you knew better, you knew logically it wasn't the right thing to do, or at least in retrospect, like after you did it, it's like, oh gosh, I can't believe I did that, but you did it anyway. Well, the reason why I was doing those things, the reason I was getting so angry and kind of raging out of my mind was, one reason is because I felt at that point in my life very insignificant. My wife had just had a child, and so the child was like sucking all the air out of the room. I felt like I wasn't being taken care of anymore, and everybody was just paying attention to the kid. And I love my daughter, but it was like, wait a second, what am I, chopped liver, right? And at the time also, I was not delivering on what I felt my obligations were to take care of my family, and we were really struggling financially. We were struggling in terms of where we were living. There's all sorts of kind of growing pains in our family at the time, and I kind of blame myself for that because I felt that was my job, and my family was kind of criticizing me for that at the time, and so I felt even more insignificant as a result of kind of multiple things. And so what's one way that you can get significance back really fast? Well, just get angry. You get really intense, even if nobody pays attention, which most of the time you get angry enough, people are going to pay attention to you, especially if they're around you. They can't help it, just for safety's sake, right? But also, even if nobody's around, you just like punch the pillow, so to speak, or punch a hole in the wall, you're going to at least feel like, hey, this is at least important to me. So I was getting super angry, and all of a sudden, because I knew this technology, right? All of a sudden I stopped myself and I'm like, why am I like this? Why am I doing things that I know, like I have standards that are way higher than what I'm currently living, and I'm hurting other people around me that I really truly care about as a result? And I suddenly realized, it's like, wow, I don't feel very good about myself right now in my life. And, my ego was bruised, and I felt insignificant. I felt unworthy, not totally worthless, but I was getting into that mode of like kind of feeling that way, right? And so the way out of that was not like, hey, do better, be productive, like contribute to your family even more, like, stretch yourself and get stronger. I mean, I was trying to do that too, but it wasn't exactly working immediately. So the fast way to get the significance back was just like get really angry. And so I did this a couple times. I stopped myself and I went to my family and I just was honest with them. I shared with them, you know what? I'm realizing this is why I am this way, right? This is why I'm being such a jerk right now. This is why I'm being nasty. This is why I'm getting so angry, like in an inappropriate fashion. I'm indulging in anger. It's because I really don't feel very significant right now. I don't feel significant to you. I don't feel significant to myself. I don't feel significant to the world. And when I communicated that, after I was aware of it, suddenly that changed the whole game for me. I mean, almost instantly, I stopped getting like angry and out of my mind, like raging and all that kind of stuff. I was like really getting intense at the time. I stopped immediately. And because why? Because now that I've admitted what's going on to my family, next time I get angry, they're going to know that's because he doesn't think much of himself. He's got like low self-esteem. And so I wouldn't get the same attention. I wouldn't get the same significance out of that. And I knew it better as well at that point. So I knew, gosh, if I'm getting angry now, it's not because this thing is so important, because I'm being so wronged. It's because I just don't think much of myself today. And that would actually take away my significance, because the jig was up. The jig was up for everybody, and the whole family knew it. So next time I felt insignificant, I didn't get angry. I did something productive, and I dealt with it, and I got to work. I used that significance, that sense of lack of significance, to drive me forward in a more productive fashion. Because once I admitted it, it's like, well, gosh, I can't get significance from that anymore. That shit ain't going to work, right? So a lot of times people will do this. They'll find ways to meet needs that if they were truly honest and responsible, they could never meet needs in those ways. And so sometimes just being aware of it, communicating it to other people, and making it so you can't allow yourself to indulge in that way of meeting the need again suddenly changes the whole way that you meet that need. Make sense? So that's just one example of like how I met needs at one point in my life in very destructive ways and hurtful ways to myself and others, and how I kind of got over it. I found a better way to meet those needs, and I'm so grateful for understanding like that's all it was. If I hadn't known that at the time, like I'd be way more of a jerk than I currently am. Right? So it's a matter of just understanding and being aware of the puppet strings. I still need significance. I still crave it. I still want to feel worthy and proud and special and powerful and different and like got something special to offer, right? I don't get that met by being a jerk anymore most of the time. Does this make sense? So that's just one example of like a way that somebody might meet a need that's destructive and making it constructive, finding ways to make that transformation actually happen. So let's go over these though. Think of these, I always think of these as vehicles, like a car that gets you from A to B. It's a car that gets you, like ways to, remember we're talking about needs here. So ways to meet those 4 survival needs. These are vehicles, the car that gets you to significance, to love, to certainty, to variety, right? This car gets you there. So you jump in the car of anger and you get significance like I did. Or you jump in the car of like, I don't know, like being with your family and all of a sudden you get love. You jump in the car of making investment decisions, let's say, and you get certainty. Get it? It's like a car that gets you from A to B. Those are vehicles through which you meet your needs. And we all have vehicles. Now, here's the challenge is like really what we need is just meet the needs, but everybody gets addicted to their vehicles, thinking that the car is what got them to work rather than just, hey, I could have any car that, there's thousands of cars, right? So this is the misconception that you've got to correct with your client. Yeah, awareness and communication. It's great point, Letitia. That's exactly what I was getting at. It's like once I was aware of the car that was a horrible car, right, getting me significance, I could just pick a different car. Like, what's the big deal, right? You could get angry and beat somebody up, or you could just help somebody, or read a book, or get a job, right? It's like, gosh, which one would be better, right? Because either of them can meet a need. Like I said, the most constructive things that we do in our lives are there as vehicles to meet needs, and the most destructive things that we do in our lives are vehicles that are there to meet needs. Whether it's negative or positive, it's all for the good. We're just kind of screwed up and miswired ourselves as to what actually meets needs, and we got to rewire. And so sometimes awareness and communication, it's all it takes to do it, like in that example. However, let's get into these different ways that people meet their needs, because don't think of vehicles as just like one thing, like a relationship or a job. It's a lot of stuff. And you want to be aware of the different vehicles that you may find in your clients that they're using, that you may, you don't want to be blind to what their actual vehicles are, right? It's easy to be blind if you're not aware of this kind of laundry list of ways that people actually meet these needs, because any one of these could be so synonymous with significance or connection or whatever need that they're actually meeting, that to them, this thing called a person or a wife or a boss or whatever, a friend, becomes the necessity. But that person, no matter what, no matter how close you are to them, that they're not necessary to you. Love is, or significance is, whatever that person gets you. That person is a car for you. I don't want to be superficial about this at all either. I mean, I understand there's great depth and connection in relationships, but again, it's not about the relationship itself. It's about the need we're meeting that makes that. And by the way, I'm not saying, hey, it's not great to have friends, not great to have loved ones and care very deeply about them. But if you care, a lot of times people say, well, I care so deeply and that's why I'm depressed. No, that's not why you're depressed. You can care deeply and not be depressed. You're depressed because that person's like a car for you and you're just using them to get a need met. That's very selfish. That's not a beautiful thing of giving to a relationship. Okay? So any of these could be addictions, not because we're addicted to the thing. They're addictions because we're we're addicted to the particular way that we meet these needs, and we think that's the only way we can meet them, and we can't give it up. Okay, but eventually in life, all of these things, these external elements, or these elements that kind of come and go, they pass, right? Everything in life outside of us is kind of not futile, but it fades away. It comes and it goes, but we can always find ways to meet our needs, no matter what stage we are in our lives. But we just can't have the same vehicle every single moment, because life is a process of growth and change, and relationships will change and places will change. Everything on this list is going to change in your life at some point. What do you want to just like be afraid of it and then like be all addicted to the certainty and like have a stranglehold on those things? Or do you want to let go and realize that these are what you're after, really? And there's tons of ways to meet it. And life is just a smorgasbord of diving into whatever's next that's going to meet those needs for you. Or you could just go internal and meet the needs. You don't need anything around you. But we'll get to that. So people, we already talked about that. You can have a relationship and get love. Or again, you could have like a bunch of friends that really like look up to you, that maybe you're more powerful than and you're smarter than or something. You hang out with people that are like, you know, not like bad, but like they're not at your level. And so you get significance from those friends, let's say. A lot of like tons of times we'll find that our clients and you and I will utilize people, not like in a negative and nasty way, but people become a vehicle for us meeting needs. If you look at me in a certain way, then I get certainty. If you look at me in a certain way, I get love. Right? We have these rules about what has to happen with certain people to actually meet that need. Places, you know, people can go to the beach and suddenly get a sense of comfort or variety, right? I can go to the mountains and get variety because, you know, I live in a flat area, right? So places could actually meet needs. I go into my office, I get into the zone, you know, it meets, you know, certainty and significance, let's say. But I go, you know, to the kitchen, you know, and I hang out with the family, and that's a whole different set of needs that are met, right? So places can meet needs. It puts you in a different mindset. It meets a needs. It meets different needs. Things. So a great example of this one would be like a car. That's obviously a vehicle, right? Like I own this Lamborghini. It's the most awesome car in the whole world. I get significance from that car, right? So I hope you're getting the idea here. I mean, people, places, and things are huge vehicles for meeting these needs. Another thing might be money. Like, you know, people like sometimes when somebody's doing really well financially, they'll say, well, they're just greedy. They just want money. Money's most important to them. That's all they care about. Look, money might be a thing that they can keep score with, and they know they won, so they can feel significant. They feel good about themselves. Hey, this is something I can measure. Somebody else does some things that are immeasurable, and they have no idea if they're really winning or losing, right? So I respect that. So there's all sorts of different things in people's lives, places in people's lives, and people in people's lives that meet different needs. Let's get a little bit more esoteric. These are more of the superficial items, the external items. This is a little bit kind of in the middle, activities, behaviors, and habits, right? So I do an activity externally still, but I still have to make myself do it. So if I take an action call, I go to the gambling house and I gamble my money away, I might get a lot of variety from that because it's a fun activity. I get a lot of variety. I'm addicted to that variety, right? Another activity or behavior, what you might call a habit or a drug, might be smoking, right? I can smoke a cigarette. I relax when I smoke. I feel a sense of certainty and comfort, right? Or I'm a marble man and I get significance because I feel like I'm like riding a horse in the Wild West, right? Or I'm Joe Camel and I'm cool because I smoke. I get significance for that, right? So it's like, you know, a drug can change somebody biochemically, right? Like, you know, if I get stoned, right, and, you know, I smoke pot, you know, it's probably going to give me a certain level of comfort because I feel that way. I feel stoned. It's like I feel nothing, right? Eliminate all emotions and all experience. Right? But bottom line is, even activity that is addicting to you, chances are it's because it meets one or more of these needs. So whether it's a drug that gives you some psychological benefit, or it changes you biochemically and alters the way that you might meet one of these needs. Because you can change your biochemistry and actually meet some needs psychologically just by the brain chemistry being altered, or it's an external activity, behavior, or habit. Things become habits because it gives you certainty about meeting one of the other needs usually. That's it. So this is kind of like in the middle of the superficiality side. Now we start going internal. This is really where it gets tricky, because most of the time, the students I'll work with I'll teach them, hey, there's things around you that you use to meet your needs. There's things around your client that they use to meet their needs. But that's not where it stops. Everything your client does, feels, thinks, etc., meets needs, or else they wouldn't do, think, or feel them. So thoughts, feelings, they meet needs. The only reason why somebody might feel joy is because they get, let's say, variety and love out of it, right? Only reason, like I was talking to you before about anger, I felt the feeling of anger and thought some pretty radical thoughts. I got a lot of significance from that, right? Let's say depression is another one. People will say, well, nobody wants to feel depressed. Well, guess what? You feel depression. That's a feeling that you have. You probably are going to love yourself because you're feeling sorry for yourself. You're probably getting a lot of certainty because depression is about being down, depressed. Like it's certain, it's stable. You know, if I go curl up in the bed, it's like I'm pretty stable. I don't have to go anywhere. You know, that's the easiest freaking thing to do in the world. And it's a feeling, and it might be painful, but again, the puppet strings are drawing me to do it anyway. Does that make sense? So all the thoughts that you have, all the feelings that you have, the only reason you think and feel them is because they meet needs. And it's the same for your client. If your client is thinking thoughts that you know they need to change, the only reason they repetitively would think those things and they can't seem to change them, or they don't want to change them, is because they meet needs. That's it. I work with a client currently, and she's like super, not just critical, but like cynical. Like she criticizes everything around her and herself, in fact, and kind of sneers at everything. And it's like just very, very cynical, right? And it's like, well, she meets these needs by being cynical, right? She can criticize something, she can look down on it, she can like deconstruct it, and she feels smart, and she feels like she's better than. It's like a whole significance thing for her, right? And she probably gets some certainty for it because then she doesn't have to try, because she could just look down on it and say, you losers, I wouldn't do that. But she's scared, like it scares the crap out of her to actually imagine doing it, of course. So she doesn't have to admit that because she could just act cynical, right? So all thoughts and feelings meet needs, at least if they're habitual for you or your client. Beliefs and values. Now people will say, well, you know, the reason why I believe what I believe is because it's true. And the real truth is the truth doesn't matter to you. And it doesn't matter to your client, and it doesn't matter to me. I mean, we kind of live in a world now where, you know, we've kind of manifested that in reality. It's like we've proven out that people don't really care about the truth that much. But this has always been the way it is. We just exposed it more with the internet and social media and whatnot. The real truth is that the only reason you believe what you believe, even if it is true, is because that belief helps you to meet these needs. If it didn't help you to meet these needs, you wouldn't believe it. Right? So when people have faith, or they see something that's really not there and they really believe in it, it meets needs, I guarantee. That's why they're believing the belief. Now again, even if you say, well, I have proof of this, so that's why I believe it. Well, yes, you're just certain about it. You're just meeting certainty. That's why truth would even matter to anybody. Because if the truth doesn't matter, well, then you might not have certainty because you don't know what's real, and you might get a lot of variety for that, but you're not going to get as much certainty met. So the reason why your client will choose destructive or limiting beliefs, which need to change, is because they're meeting needs with those beliefs. Same with values. You value something, you need to change your value set, you need to change your priorities. The reason you value what you value right now is because it meets the needs, certain needs that you are needing to maintain, and so you'll maintain that value set even if it's not the most constructive value set. Goals and focuses. Now, normally goals and focuses are more referring to activities, behaviors, things, people, places, etc. That's why I pointed this, back in this direction, because it really covers these items here. So I have a goal to get a thing. I have a focus on a place or a person. Does that make sense? But the reason why your goals and focuses will occur, why your client will have certain goals and focuses, is because those goals and focuses are about things, people, places, activities, etc. that meet these needs. It's the only reason they have the goals. Whenever I ask my client for the first time, if I just meeting somebody, what are your goals? And I find out, wow, my goal is to make $1 billion, and I want this and this and this, and it's something that's like all about like how great they're going to be. I know significance is a driving force for them. But if their goal is like, I want, to really take care of my family and just make sure everybody's safe, I know certainty is probably a driving force. People will select their goals based upon which needs they're operating for at that point. That's it. So goals and focuses are selected not because you just consciously made it up, that's like came from nothing and made a existential choice. You came up with that stuff because it was driven by needs that were already existing before you made that decision. It's like a puppet on the end of a puppeteer's string. Now, does that mean that you can be like free of that just by knowing this stuff? No, not necessarily. But there's never been a puppet that was aware they were a puppet, so to speak, right? You cease to be completely a puppet when you see the strings and you understand how it works, because then you can kind of override it. Now, again, that's probably only temporary. But even a temporary override actually can create new existential feelings, behaviors, beliefs, values, and this becomes a new program that creates a different life. Make sense? Yeah, a home, okay, Letitia says a home for status, right? Like if it's just a home, like a crappy home, right? And it's just like, it keeps me warm, it keeps me dry. Okay, well that's probably a certainty belief. That's a place or a thing that just meets certainty. But if I've got a mansion, like we were talking about before, well, that's a place or a thing that gives me maybe just as much significance as it does certainty. So it could be the same thing that somebody might have for different reasons. Make sense? Because that's the difference in people. All right, final couple, identity and roles. So if I say, I'm a coach, or I'm a leader, or I'm a manager, or I'm a wife, right? Or I'm, a father. Like those roles, those identities, who you think you are, what you think you deserve, what you think is possible for you, what you believe you're capable of, all those identity beliefs and those roles that you take on in your life, you wouldn't have them if they didn't meet needs. I remember seeing this particular, well, actually, I had a couple coaching sessions like this too with people over the years, where people will lose their job and they'll get suicidal when they lose their job. And the reason is because that role gave them one or more of these needs at really high levels. And when they lost that role, they freaked out. And they freaked out because suddenly they started, they unconsciously attached that role to their life, to survival, psychological survival. And so they come to me and they're like, Jeff, I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do. I'm totally stressed. I'm having a panic attack about this, right? It's not about that. It wasn't about the role or lack thereof. It was about these needs. And so when I have a coaching session with somebody like that, like a career change or a role change or a loss of a role, I'll explain to them this connection, and suddenly they're free from those puppet strings. It's just amazing the experience of freedom that you can give your client when you give them this, and also tremendous power of like rejiggering the strings that you're attached to, rejiggering like what are you going to connect up, people, place, things, thoughts, feelings, behavior, beliefs, etc., to these needs so that you actually can empower yourself and others in ways that you may never have before had you done the old program. All right, so identity and roles are huge with this. When people have identity crisis, it's not an identity crisis. They don't care about their identity. It's a crisis of meeting needs, and their identity is no longer doing it for whatever reason, or they're losing an old identity that they thought met all their needs. That makes sense? Finally, and this is kind of an over generalization, but think of it this way: your client's whole life is about that. So this is basically what, if you look at somebody's life, pretty much everything in their life is on here already, right? So if you just look at their life, you're going to know what needs they overvalue. You're going to know how they think they meet their needs and how they maybe think they're not meeting their needs. You're going to know almost everything about them. When I can find out my clients' life and goals, they just, hey, tell me about your life, tell me about your goals. I basically know the whole story at that point, right? This is just their story about how they organize things, but I know why they organize them in those ways. And we can rewire it if it's needed. And in these cases, when we're talking about somebody that doesn't change, why people don't change is because this stuff is wired up, and their coach ain't very good at rewiring it, or they don't even know that it's wired up that way. They don't even see the puppet strings. That's it. So you want to know what their needs are that are driving them. You want to know how they've chosen those needs, how they've chosen vehicles. Look at their life and you'll know. That's really, really it. Whether it's a job or being a great mom or believing in something, whether it's there or not, or smoking or anger, depression, where's the feelings thing, or a car or a family, etc. You go on and on and on. This is every client you'll ever work with. They fall in to some story that they bought into that meets these needs. And you can get them beyond that so they kind of overcome the world, so to speak. And then they can create a world that is going to be way beyond what they have currently, because they can just rewire it up, because you can actually facilitate those elements. Have them actually make those shifts conversationally and then emotionally. Make sense? I know this is kind of theoretical at this point. We're going to get to the how-to right now. Okay. So finally, I think I'm going to share this first. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'll give an example. This is a client I worked with today, and they had a goal they came to me with called balancing my business. It's like my life is out of balance. I'm trying to balance business and family. That's what she said. And so she told me, you know what, my business, is really great, but it's not going as well as I want. It's kind of falling apart. And because of my business, she said to me, I don't have enough time for my family. So I'm giving 100% to my business, but I feel like I'm failing, and I don't have enough time for my family, so I feel empty inside. Can you empathize with that? Can you get a sense of what that would feel like? You gave it all to your business and you still love your family, but your business is not going as well as you think you deserve it to go. And then so now you're missing on your family. It's like you feel like you don't have anything. Like my business isn't going well, my family's not going well. It's just like feeling just empty inside. You gave it all and you got nothing in return. This is how she came to me today. And when she said, I feel empty inside, she started crying. I have total empathy for her in this area, but at the same time, I couldn't let her stay here and indulge in just crying about it, because that wasn't going to change anything. So I had to diagnose this. I had to explain to her, look, you are not trying to balance business and family. You're trying to balance these kind of differing needs. You go to business for significance and certainty, because I talked to this woman about her background. She grew up in the third world where there wasn't a lot of certainty around, and that was in the form of lack of money. In fact, her mother at one point had to abandon her for a short time, and it was one of the most excruciatingly painful and scary moments in her life, and she's still getting over that. It was lack of significance, a lack of certainty, but because of money. And so she found, hey, if I do business, I'll get this stuff and I'll take care of it, and I'll never let that happen to me or my family. And now she's struggling with that. So she's struggling with significance and certainty, feeling insignificant and uncertain about the future because of the financial and the business aspects that aren't working well right now. But she still totally loves her family. Family's the most important thing to her, really. But now she's not even spending time with her family, so she feels empty, i.e. a lack of love. So I feel like I'm a failure, lack of significance. I feel like I'm empty, lack of love. Does that translate? Here, these are the words she said, but this is what I heard. So no wonder she's freaking out and she needs a session, right? But I understood also, because she came to me crying, being crying and sad is a connection thing. That's a love thing. You're like loving yourself. You're feeling deeply for yourself, right? Feelings that you haven't felt before, right? So I knew that this was the more important to her out of these two, even though both of them were quite important. And so my coaching for her was, you know what? Your business and your money and all this kind of stuff, that's great. But you got to stop being so scared of that and give yourself the connection with your family that you deserve. And if you do that, So the rest of it's going to work itself out. And even if it doesn't, this is more important to you. You got to have priorities. And you've been acting like the business is more important. So no wonder you feel empty inside. It's not because you should feel empty inside. It's just that you want more time and more connection with your family. So go get it. Your family's here. We love you. You know, it's like, let's go for it. Right? And so that was the coaching I gave her, not because she can't have a business, but because it's like, you need more of this. Because obviously this is the piece that you're more present to missing out on. Now, what if she had come to me angry and saying, I'm so tired of this business not working out. I've had it with this. Well, then I would know that that anger emotion was much more of a significance priority, and it would have worked with her on the business vehicle, chances are. Or we would have to rewire this. And by the way, some people will cover up that they really need connection because they're scared of that, because that's a wound area for them, and they'll act like they're all significance driven instead. Maybe that would have been the case. I don't know. But I would have had to go with it in a different direction with her in that case. So that was very simple coaching, but it came from a place of understanding deeply what was really driving that client at this time so that she could actually meet her needs. And by the time we got to the end of the session, she was smiling and laughing and excited and feeling like she'd made a real decision that would matter to her to like reprioritize her family, which is really what she needed to do. But I wouldn't have known that had I not understood what was going on for her psychologically and kind of what was going on deep down for her, kind of in her nature, because her nature was for connection, not for significance. She just learned this over her lifetime to try to go after this because she felt a lack of it at one point in her life, but love was what she was wired for, what she still is wired for. Does that make sense? You need to understand what somebody's operating for versus what they're wired for. And I don't want to overcomplicate this, but this gives you an idea of like, how do you actually suss out what's really going on? Look at the vehicles, look at the emotions, and work out what needs to happen so they can actually get a decision or make a change that's truly going to be empowering for them. So, how to use this? I'm going to give you 5 fairly simple steps. I want you to apply this to yourself first so you can get a sense of what this brings up in you, and then we can go to apply it to anybody that we're coaching. So number 1, what's your driver, i.e. need, that's driving your life right now? Now, everybody needs all 4, right? Everybody needs significance and certainty and love and connection and variety. But what's driving your life right now? Like, what's your life about? Is it about achieving, like significance? Is it about like safety, like certainty? Is it about, or survival, which is probably certainty as well? Is it more about like family or connection or something that's more of a love type of thing? Is it more variety, like going on ventures, right? Like, what's your driver in your life right now? A lot of people lately, because we're in a crisis period, are all about certainty. I'm just kind of hunkering down and locking down and trying to like just save all my money, and, you know, they buy toilet paper, right? And that's their way of getting certainty. That's the driver in their life right now. Right? So everybody's got a different one. What's yours? What's the primary driver for you? I don't mean deep down, right? Because deep down you're probably about love or about, you know, about variety or adventure or something. But deep, like, forget about that. Just what are you living your life for today? Like, we want to know behaviorally speaking, because that's what hooked you, at least currently. Second, how do you meet that need? Like, what are you up to that's meeting that need? We talked about a lot of descriptions, so I won't go belabor that one. Like, what's your vehicle for that? What gets you from A to B? What's the primary way that you get that need met? Significance or certainty, whatever it is. What's the way that you actually do it? Okay, so great. High achievement is like you have some achievement that you're after that probably meets like certainty or significance, as chances are usually achievers are very much driven by one or the other or both of those. Usually people aren't going after achievement for connection, right? Sometimes it could be a variety thing, but not as commonly, right? So we know there is a vehicle, and we know there's a need. You want to answer these 2 questions, be clear, because that's the primary driver for your life right now. It's not the vehicle, the achievement, or the person. It's that need that's driving you to actually cultivate that vehicle, right? So how do you meet that need? And the way we always meet it is through these vehicles that we described just in that last thing that I threw away, right? Third, how does that pattern limit you? Every pattern has their own limitations. If you're all about achievement and that gives you massive significance, you're going to be limited in what area? Chances are connection. Yeah, I'm not saying you don't have any, but you might miss out on the depths of love that you really deserve. or you might not give that as much time, or it might not be as deep as you could truly feel if you allowed yourself to feel that more deeply because you're going after the significance at that point, right? So, and by the way, vice versa, if somebody's like all about connection, they're all about their family, and that's like their driver and their need and their vehicle, well, that pattern could limit you in achievement, right? That pattern could make you feel like you're, really not that important, except that you just are there to serve everybody else, right? You might not feel like yourself anymore, right? So there's a limitation to every one of those patterns that you can understand from 1 and 2. So how does that pattern limit you? Write it down, get clear on it. And then finally, question number 4, what need is lost? Right? So whatever limitation you wrote down, the reason why that's a limiting issue, why that's literally an issue for you, is because there's a need that you're not meeting as strongly and as powerfully, at as high a level as you truly could. It's what's possible for you, or what you feel you deserve, or what you really desire for your life, right? So like, for instance, achievers, significance, patterns limiting them probably in terms of connection and whatever vehicles of connection is available, right? And vice versa maybe, or certainty and variety for you, right? So just clarify what is the paired opposite, what need is paired up with opposite of what you currently getting a lot of. A lot of significance, probably missing love. A lot of certainty, probably missing variety, or vice versa. Make sense? And then, what are the consequences of that pattern? What are the long-term consequences of that pattern in your life? Let's take a look at the consequences. Because if you don't see the consequences of that pattern, you'll just keep doing it and saying, hey, I'm okay, I'm just meeting my needs, right? So you want to be clear about the consequences of every pattern so you can see forward. You can simulate the future. You can simulate, and by the way, you probably are living the consequences right now, but there's going to be more in the future if you really look out, right? So what are the consequences of that pattern, the limitation and the need that's lost? Like, what is this really going to end up creating long term? What's your driver? How do you meet that need? Vehicle. How does that pattern limit you? And what need is lost as a result, or not met at as high a level? And then what are the consequences of that pattern? We can see around us in life warnings of consequences of any pattern that we're running currently. You can see it. You can find somebody who is your future if you don't make that change that you probably need to make, or that is hypothetical, right? Yeah, loss relate. Yeah, that's, that's kind of the classic one, right? Like, I achieved, I made billions of dollars, and everybody worships me. God personally bows to you, and yet I lost my connection and my relationship, and I'm separate from people around me, even though people love me or people want to be around me, right? There's always some kind of self-defeatingness about that pattern. And we want to see that for ourselves first, just selfishly, right? And then finally, this is not really a numbered question, it'd be number 6 if it was. What are you going to do about it? Now that you know the drivers, you know the limitation and the loss, or what you're going to miss out on and the consequences of that, what are you going to do about that? Because now that you're clear about this pattern, limitations, the consequences, the issues associated with that pattern, and you see your puppet strings and how you're just like kind of a slave to that stuff, you have a moment of freedom, a moment of consciousness where you can actually do something about it, but that doorway will close. That moment of freedom will go away, and you'll be unconscious again. You'll just be the puppet again. You go right back into slavery, right? So you have this moment of freedom where you can see this stuff, and then what are you going to do about it? And whatever that plan is, if it's going to hopefully like have a whole different way of approaching life or career or family or whatever, and then you're able to meet those needs and avoid these consequences or create better consequences, let's say, suddenly you have a plan for what you really could do to make a difference in your life above and beyond what you would have done naturally and unconsciously had we not had this conversation, right? Yeah, the question is, Letitia says, find balance. The question, because there is going to be a balancing process here that we talk about, which is good to know. And I'm not saying, and here's the point here, it's not like, well, you can't go after that need, right? Like you might still be unbalanced in that area, but are there ways that you can mitigate consequences of that loss of balance or the lost need? Sure there are. Whether or not you ever shift, like this is not about you like doing a 180 and having to be a completely different person. Maybe you've discovered a lot about your nature here, and like that's cool if that's the case. And then, but notice the consequences so we can walk into that with both eyes open, and so we can be aware and navigate totally consciously and know what we're getting ourselves into. Or is the way that you're living in your life, what's driving and what's meeting needs currently in your life, is that not really you? And what's really at your core and your nature is something you're really losing and missing out on. You need to really make a massive change. And not that you totally miss out on these other things. That might be great that you've encouraged those things and experienced those things. But maybe there's some other things that's just not okay to lose because the consequences would be just too regretful, too painful for you. What are you going to do about that? What's the strategy? Don't just be vague, like I'm going to find this, I'm going to do that. It's like, what's the plan? Like, how's your life going to be different as a result? How are you going to meet more needs at higher levels more consistently for yourself and others as a result of that? That's what we want to explore. And then finally, I know there's a mouthful here, and we've covered this for, we've gone quite long, so I'm going to end it here. But the final piece is, as you do this for yourself and you get clear on this, the reason why we're working with you first is just because you're here. The purpose of this conversation and this little kind of mini training is that you're going to do this with your clients. The final piece is ask your clients the same questions. Ask them, what's your driver in life? What do you think between these needs? Explain this to them. Ask them, find out what they think. Find out how they currently meet that needs. How does that pattern limit them? They may not want to answer that question. You might need to share this with them. It might not be an easy conversation to have. You might need to point out what need they're missing out on, they're losing as a result, and what the consequences are, or at least ask them these questions, see if they can answer them. When they start to realize this, you're finding the blind spot for them. You're finding the missing piece. You're challenging them in a way that almost no other coach is ever going to do. And when you do that, even the clients that come to you and are like, you can't tell me anything. I know it all. You can't make me change. I don't want to make any change. I'm fine. I'm perfect. I'm an achiever. I'm awesome. You share this with them, or you show them these patterns in them, they will actually get access to something they never would have beforehand, and they will actually change even if they originally didn't want to, because they're going to start wanting this because they're going to see what's truly lost, and they're going to see that these things are actually critical and that they're driving their life, and they'll have been blind to this until that point. That is what I have used over the last 20 years to make the biggest difference, even in one session for a client. Even if they knew things I didn't know or way above me in business or achievement or whatever, they don't have these elements for themselves. Who's going to unravel this for those individuals? Nobody, except for me, from the looks of it at the time, right? And so suddenly I can add value to anybody because I could see these patterns, work with them on them, and suddenly they find a way through what originally would have been a very limiting experience for them in their life. We're about not just giving them a choice, but blowing the limits, blowing the lid off of what has been limiting them in their life currently. And this is it. They are their own limitation, not because they limit themselves, but because their psychology is set up for this. It's set up to limit them. Even though they get better and better and better, one thing, it's like they've got to make a shift there. So they can see the necessity in this, and they'll only, like I said, change when it's a necessity, not when it's a nice thing to have, a want. And this is what changes, coming full circle here, what originally was just a want for them, like I'd like to have a better relationship, I'd like to be healthier, I'd like to make more money, whatever their like to is, right? They have as a goal. I'd like to have that too. I've got to have that. That's a necessity now because I see what I'm going to miss out on. I see what the consequences are. Make sense? That's it. Yeah, you got it. Of course, Letitia. So do this with your clients. Ask your clients these same questions. And then, I mean, we're not getting this today, but your job here as the really great coach that you are is to make sure that these bottom two, that when they get clear on these and when you get clear on them, as you share them or talk about them, that you've got to twist. This is a knife if you didn't know. You've got, I don't know how to draw a good knife. You got to twist the knife. because this experience of them missing out on those needs and that being quite painful for them, this is where if you don't give them enough of an experience of what I call leverage, which is basically like, wow, that's really painful for me to absolutely not have that in my life, the regret of that, the loss of that, the pain of that, the issue that creates for myself and others. If you twist that enough, whether they want to or not, or whether they wanted to or not initially, they're going to change. And secondly, by the way, you're the one that led them to that, so they're going to know that you're a trusted advisor, coach, leader, etc. for them, probably for life. Because like I said, nobody else is going to unravel this for them. How would this feel if they didn't change it? What's the future going to be? What are the worst consequences of that? You find that out, yeah, like Letitia said in the chat, that's deep. This is how to go deep with a client, even if your client has everything else together. And what the worry I have with our students and with coaches that even we've trained is that they stay on the surface and they talk about all this other stuff. They talk about the strategy, the external strategy, and that's it, rather than what's really going on inside. This is why people don't change, and this is actually what will cause them to change once you discover what the actual puppet strings are for them. So work on this stuff. Ask yourself these questions. Get it clear for yourself. Take your own life to the next level, and then apply it to your clients and how they can make a difference for themselves by setting themselves free, at least temporarily, from those puppet strings, getting new puppet strings so they can be on a new track in their life. Yeah, you're going to be able to rewatch this for a while. We eventually will take it down because it's part of just a live portion of a training we're doing currently in Strategy Immersion Training. But yeah, you can definitely rewatch this for a while before we do take it down. That said, before we go, two things. Number one is I'm gonna keep the replay up on YouTube. I'll post those links to YouTube so you can get access to those. Feel free to subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and you'll get updates. Hit the bell, you'll get the updates to when these trainings are coming across. And then secondly, if this is the kind of strategy approach that you know you need, and you're not currently a student of Master Coach University, you're not in any of the immersion trainings right now, check out mastercoachuniversity.com. We got more free trainings like this, and then also you can always get certified with us and really become a master of this. This is really what it takes to change somebody's life, in my experience, even, like I said, when they don't want to. So take care. I look forward to seeing you on the next training. Do your homework if you're a part of Strategy Immersion Training, and I will talk to you next time. Take care until then.